What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing another killstreak breakdown, this time once again taking a look at some more subscriber gameplay. Today we're going to be taking a look at a 65 killstreak with Iden Versio on Kraden. This gameplay comes from Drips. A big thank you to Drips who submitted the gameplay for this series, so I'll leave a link to the original killstreak on his channel if you guys do want to go and show him some love. Now, as always, if you guys do want to submit your own gameplay to be broken down, then there is a link in the description of all of my videos. I generally only do streaks between about 40 to 75 just because that's a very obtainable kill streak for any newer or less experienced players to get, so I'm definitely going to be keeping it to that sort of sweet spot where there's still a really high kill streak but not too high to where none of us regular guys are going to be able to get the same type of gameplay. But anyway, guys, with that out of the way, let's get stuck right into the gameplay. So the first thing I wanted to really touch on was that I think Iden is honestly a pretty underrated character in this game. She's obviously used quite a lot in Heroes vs Villains. She's probably honestly one of the main characters that people use in that game just because she is so dominant against heroes. But even though she is definitely a little bit harder to use in Galactic Assault, I do still think that she is a pretty solid character just because of the fact that she can pretty much do well on every single map, and I'm going to go through why that is the case. Now, before we get into that though, the one thing I wanted to talk about in this actual section of the gameplay is to do with the way that he's navigating the cover here. I would say it's definitely better to, you know, stick to these little bits of cover there with the underground tunnels and stuff. Now, obviously Iden does have her shield, which he's got activated at the moment, so she does have a little bit of extra leeway there, but I would still recommend on this map to not be running around on top of the surface like this, at least not unless you're around maybe the legs of the walker, which she is fairly close here, so it's not the end of the world, but I thought that was worth mentioning because at least I feel like when I'm playing as Iden, if this was me, I would be dead about 3 times over by now. So it's always good to just remember to have those sort of fallback positions, especially with the Blaster hero. It's pretty much the case for any hero that you play, but especially with Blaster heroes, they just have that, I guess, the little bit of extra danger because they can't jump around like crazy like the Saber users, and they're also a little bit slower. So what he's doing right now, obviously hanging around the feet of the ATM-6, obviously that's pretty handy and that's a good way to stay above ground if you do want to. But generally, at least when I'm playing, I would tend to sort of hang around in those, you know, the entrances to the tunnels, and you can peek your head up and still obviously shoot at enemies like he's doing here, but yeah, just running around like consistently on the top is generally something you don't want to be doing. But in saying that, he has obviously done pretty well here and it hasn't got him killed, so take that as you will, but I thought that was just worth mentioning anyway. Now, getting back to what I was talking about with, you know, Iden being a bit of an underrated character, the reason I think that is honestly just because of the kit that she has. She's obviously got the alternate fire on her TL50, as well as just the TL50 in general is a pretty decent blaster. But then as you can see here, Drips is obviously using the pulse cannon quite a lot, and this is something that I think honestly gets underused quite a bit. I don't think a lot of people actually use the pulse cannon, but you can see he is kind of doing work with it here. It is honestly like as good as any sniper in the game. I believe it is a one-shot headshot to any class in the game. I could be wrong, but I know even mostly to the body it'll actually still be a one-shot kill on all classes except for a heavy. So it's a pretty decent blaster, and I don't actually see a lot of kill streaks where people, you know, maximize their use of it. Obviously it does depend heavily on the map. Like obviously this map is just perfect for the pulse cannon and some maps just aren't, like the Death Star for example, but I think that is why Iden is a little bit underrated for me personally, because she can do really well on every single map just because of she essentially has every range covered, with the pulse cannon obviously being good for long range. Her TL50 is really good for that sort of mid to close range, and then the alternate fire on the TL50 is honestly a little bit overpowered at close range. So she's pretty strong in every area, and obviously she's not the best hero in the game by any means, but I think in terms of, you know, all the heroes who rely on certain maps to do well or stuff like that, I don't think Iden honestly matters what map you play her on. She's really, really decent depending on whether or not you actually know how to play her. So we're going to be going through, you know, some of those tips in this video. So obviously I've fast forwarded through most of this section here. The reason for that is just because it is all much of the same. This is a pretty long phase of the map obviously, so rather than just dragging it out, you can kind of see the general idea of what he's doing here. But they are moving on now to the second phase, and this is where it starts to get a little bit more, I guess, intense. Obviously you've got to get into those close quarters areas, and Iden is still really decent at that range, like I said. Her alternate fire and just the TL50 in general are really decent, and also the shield, I think that is something that kind of goes a little bit unnoticed sometimes. If you get in trouble, you can obviously just pop the shield and sort of run to safety. So she is still really, really good in close quarters. You do just have to sort of play it a bit smarter rather than, you know, someone like Han who's a bit more, I guess, aggressive than she might be. Now, like I said at the start of the video, just to essentially repeat what I said, I would definitely not recommend running into this phase above ground. Obviously it doesn't really matter in this gameplay because no one's really shooting at him, but just for those of you guys watching, I would definitely recommend to always use the tunnel. I honestly never ever enter this second phase by, you know, doing it above ground. I always use the tunnel. Mostly just because most people are going to be, when you're sort of moving into that second phase, the enemy team generally sit back and snipe, and that's when most of the people are actually going to be sniping rather than in that whole first phase. Simply because they have actually got a bit of cover now, and it's also so dark in here that sometimes you can't really see that from the outside. So oftentimes it does feel like when you run in above ground, you're just going to get absolutely mauled by about 20 snipers on the enemy team. So like I said, it didn't really matter in this gameplay, so it's not necessarily do or die, but I would definitely just recommend doing that if you guys are going to be moving into the second phase. And if you're not too sure where those tunnels are, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, if you go into the final trench, you can go all the way to the left or all the way to the right before you head into the actual hangar. And when you get to either end of the trench, there is a little doorway that takes you to a tunnel, and it actually leads straight up in there. So if you guys didn't know that that's there, I would definitely recommend, even if you're not honestly playing as a hero, it's just a smarter way to get into this second phase. Now, like I was saying earlier too, you can just see how good the pulse cannon is here. I kind of do get surprised why so many people don't tend to use it, but you can just see the work that he's doing here with it, and it's absolutely dominant. He is essentially spawn trapping the enemy team by himself with that pulse cannon. So yeah, it's really great to sort of use that whenever you need to, and you can see that he's also doing a great job of not just using that. He's kind of switching between different weapons and, you know, making the most of all his abilities and stuff like that. He's not sticking to one range and just, you know, sitting there sniping. He kind of gets a bunch of kills and then pushes up and tries to help capture the area. And then you can see there he got in trouble and he actually just falls back and, you know, tries to play it a bit safer for a minute and sort of push those enemies back again before he pushes in. So as far as I'm concerned, he's doing essentially the perfect job of this here. He's helping his team, but he's also spawn trapping and just, you know, farming kills at the same time. It's kind of a win-win for everyone. Now, I did also want to say that he is making really good use of the cover here. You can see he's hanging around the little sort of you know, objects in and amongst this capture point, and it's actually a pretty big contrast to that first phase where I was pretty much saying, you know, you shouldn't be out in the open so much and you should be hanging around cover, and now that's essentially what he's doing. So he is definitely making the most of that. There is a lot of, you know, trouble you can get into, especially in such a close quarters area. If you're not hanging around cover, then you can get in a lot of trouble, and especially there is a Ray running around here. If you're way out in the open, that can lead to a bit of trouble, because if she pushes you and, you know, you're trying to just fend her off, you're still in the open from so many other people, and that's going to get you in a lot of trouble. So I think he's doing a great job here of just making the most of all of that cover. And you can see here he does actually take out Ray with that, the alternate fire, which again, that's a little bit overpowered to be completely honest, but that is definitely the best way to be using it. It doesn't really matter that it's OP because, you know, it's still there to be used. So that's a great tip. If you guys didn't know that, the Saber heroes cannot block that. There's nothing they can do against it. So if someone's really low health, and even if they're blocking, just shoot that at their feet and they're pretty much going to go down. There's literally nothing they can do to counter that pretty much. And that's mostly why I consider that to be a little bit overpowered. But like I said, Iden definitely isn't the best character, so with characters who aren't, you know, OP in general, I'm generally fine with them having like an ability or something that is a little bit overpowered, because it does kind of balance it out a little bit. And so yeah, he's definitely making the most of that here, and you can just see he is really just racking up the kills here. He's at 50 already in the second phase, which is, it's pretty crazy, especially on crate. Honestly, for me personally, on that first phase, I tend to struggle to get kills. So the fact he's already, you know, not even headed into that third phase and he's already at a 50 kill streak, that is definitely a very, very good game so far. Now, I'm actually just going to fast forward through this little section here because it is pretty much just much of the same here. They do end up capturing this objective, and then obviously they move on to the third phase here. This can be a pretty crazy phase, honestly, just because it's so congested, and especially like Iden can either be really, really good, or she can kind of suck, honestly. It just depends on the parts of the map that you're sort of fighting at, because the alternate fire can obviously dominate if there's a bunch of enemies like just sort of bunched up, and, you know, like that right there, where unfortunately he didn't get a bunch of kills, but then you can see the second shot, he's just racking up kills there. So there's certain times when she is really, really dominant, but then there's also certain areas of the map that you really probably don't want to get to, and you can see he is pretty low on health here, so at this point I would be trying to sort of slow it down. I'm not actually sure what the hell that kill there was, but free kill, free health, so I can't really complain. But yeah, this phase can be pretty tough to push into, but once you do get in there, and once you can kind of push the enemy team back behind those, like the doors at the back of the cave there, that can be when you can start to rack up a lot of kills. But this part here, this is pretty tricky to get into. He has the right idea here of like not pushing too hard, but he's obviously still trying to get the enemies back a little bit and sort of help his teammates get in there. Once your teammates are all in there, it's generally going to be pretty safe. But if you try to push in too early, there can obviously be heroes, there can just be a bunch of enemies waiting. So he is pushing up here. He sort of looked at that left side. He could see that he sort of vetted this area before he actually ran in here and, you know, took these guys out. So that might have seemed like a bit of a silly decision to sort of sprint in there, but I think he did actually check. He could sort of see there was only 2 up there. So he's in a really good spot now, and this is pretty much what I was talking about earlier. Once you can get to this sort of area where you can overlook that sort of big doorway, and even you can see what he's doing there. He's just essentially like counter sniping the people on the other side. But you can see here that Ray is pushing, and considering how low his health is, I would honestly start to fall back, which is what he does here. But he unfortunately gets stuck with the mind trick there. He does survive this, and he actually takes her out, which is very helpful for, you know, the extra health there. So he did get pretty lucky there, to be honest. I feel like if that was me, I would be dead. I would have panicked a bit and ended up dying. So he did well to survive that, and essentially from here on out, he just needs to be doing what he's doing here, trying to get up onto these little perches. And perfect example there when when he's taking a bit of health, just pop the shield and run back to safety, and that's generally the best thing you can do in that situation. Now his death is coming up here, and I think the main reason for this death was mostly just getting a little bit too aggressive considering his health. Obviously if he was full health this wouldn't be too bad, but considering his health, I would be definitely sort of just sitting back and doing what he was doing before, using that pulse cannon to just sort of pick enemies off. And if you can get your health back up, then obviously you can play a bit more aggressive. But you can see here he is sort of pushing up a little bit too close, and it's fine if there's not too many enemies, but there is a Hahn there who throws the detonite and knocks him, and then he did actually try and equip his shield, which he did by the end, but he was unfortunately dead by then. So overall it was a really, really solid kill streak, and I thought he played Iden like honestly borderline perfect until the end there. And those type of deaths, like that's, if you guys have watched all the videos in this series, that is literally about 90% of the deaths that I personally get. Are just, you know, you get to that certain number, like a 50 kill streak for example, and then you just kind of want to send it a little bit and try and get a few more kills. So there's not too much really to talk on there. He obviously played a little bit aggressive, but I'm sure he would already know that when he died in that moment. So I think really the only fix there would have just been to do what he was doing earlier, using that pulse cannon, and even just using the alternate fire on her TL50 to just sit back and sort of try and pick off some enemies and get that health up. And then when the health is back up, then obviously he can be a little bit more aggressive. But that is going to do it for this one though, guys. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. Like I said, if you have your own gameplay that you would like to submit, then be sure to submit that through the link down in the description, and I'll try and get through as many as I can in the next few months. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.